let's go ahead and do it. Really happy to have Alex, who works with SellerBoard, here with us today. And I was just sharing with Alex before we kicked this thing off that SellerBoard has been maybe the second most important tool in our tool stack since it came out, and only probably second to Amazon's your seller app on your phone. That's the one I probably check the most frequently. And then the one that I get the most value out of is SellerBoard, because it actually shows me how I'm doing from a profitability standpoint every day. And there's nothing that makes you feel hopefully better if the numbers look good. And also nothing that makes you feel like, oh, how did I lose, how did I lose money on this? Better than this tool SellerBoard. But if the insights that you get from SellerBoard are awesome. And it's been, like I said, one of my favorite tools since we got it a few years ago. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Alex.
Hello, Brian. Thank you for your interest in this topic. Hello to everyone watching this in the recording. And I'm glad to be here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the topic of profitability, about some of the things that sometimes usually go under the radar, but they do influence your profitability in some form or way. And most of the sellers that end up with SellerBoard, they actually find a good way to, regularly check and whether these things are affecting their profit or not. But today, I'm going to be mostly talking about the ways that you can actually do it yourself without any additional tools. And this is the most part of my presentation is dedicated to that, about what you actually can do on your own. Yeah, so Brian, Robin, if we're good to go, I can share my screen, I can dive into the demo, and then after that, I think I'm going to have a Q&A session, and I'll be glad to answer the questions that you might have.
All right.
Okay, so
go for it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Then I'll share my screen. All right. So yeah, today we're going to talk about the things that we call usually profit killers, things that influence your profitability most of the times without you noticing this. And well, probably most of you are already using some kind of workflow to analyze how well you're performing in terms of your sales and maybe your profit, even in calculations done in spreadsheets, or maybe using some other tool. I know that there are people that all are already SellerBoard users here today, but maybe some of the people who are still calculating their profit in spreadsheets. So the question that is the most important to be answered at the end of the day is how much you're making in profit with every unit sold. This is basically the most important question you can ask yourself when selling on Amazon. And there are certain ways to do it to answer that question. So when you're trying to answer the question, you need to factor in some specific stuff, right? So for instance, ask yourself, what was the storage fee that was allocated to every product? How much you paid for inbound shipment for every product? And if you were kind of forced to drop the price on a certain product, was it still profitable after that event? Or maybe there is some competitor activity, and depending on what's happening on the listing, does it affect your profitability or not? Or maybe you receive the products from a new batch and they have a new cost of goods. With the new cost of goods, are you still profitable with that bar? And also, when Amazon fees changed, how that affected your profitability? Or maybe the refund rate on a product changed, so it went up or it went down, how that affected your profitability. So my point is that there are a lot of different factors you need to take into account. And the problem with that is they're always constantly changing. So if you're trying to account for everything, then you need to do a lot of manual work. You need to pull a lot of reports. You need to combine them into big spreadsheets. You need to do a lot of calculations. And it only makes sense to have a system that would, by default, take all of these factors into account, and not only do that, but also provide you with a level of granularity that will enable you to dive deeper, to basically zoom in from an account level to ASIN level analysis. When you provide basically these factors, when you pull the reports, you need to ask yourself, okay, if I'm sure about the calculations I'm doing, what can I do to improve my profitability? So this is a question that is a part of one of the three main areas when you can analyze your numbers, right? The first being profit and loss. This is mostly what SellerBoard is about. Then your cash flow. This is how much money you have inside your business that is, needed for operation, the profit and loss, the cash flow, and the balance sheet. So today we're going to talk about the profit and loss part because this report helps us understand whether we are making profit per unit sold or not. So, and when we're analyzing those factors that influence our profitability, right? So we basically can highlight probably the first factor that influences, in my opinion, profitability the most. And this is why we call it profit killer number one, and it's underperforming products, right? So think of it like this. You might have a product that you can consider your like top seller, right? Like the sales go through the roof and everything. But when you zoom in, you might discover that it's actually not making too much profit, right? So your margin of the product is pretty low, taking into account all the factors I described earlier. So let's dive into that. How can we detect our underperforming products and what can we do about it? So in order to detect underperforming products, we need to compile a SKU profitability table, which pretty much looks like this: number of units sold, their sale price, then their cost of goods per unit, then a formula that will calculate your revenue, then your refunds in total value, then your refund rate, cost of goods for all of the units sold, then percentage of cost of goods. So how much does it take from the total amount sold? And the same thing for Amazon fees in value, in percentage, and for tacos, also in value and percentage. And then your gross profit will be calculated and in total value and in margin. So basically all of these columns right here. And because it will help us understand the full picture on a product level. So this is what is ultimately necessary to highlight underperforming products and decide what should you do next with them, because there are several ways you can go. And how can it be done? So first of all, you need to pull some reports, right? And in step 2, over here on the slide, they have some sources where you can get that. So units sold in Sales Central, you can go to reports, business reports, detail page, and sales traffic. That's where you can get your units sold. The cost of goods obviously is your own data, your spreadsheet. Amazon doesn't have it. Then the report paths for refunds, Amazon fees, and tacos are on the screen right now. So if you want to go that path and try it yourself, I suggest making a screenshot and maybe try to pull those reports. Next, when you have all of that data, then you need to combine everything together. And for that, you will need to kind of master two things. First of all, you need to build a pivot table or pivot table. You know how it's correctly pronounced. And then inside that pivot table is basically a spreadsheet that will pull all this data from different sources, from different pages, and combine everything together using the VLOOKUP function. So this function will identify the products using a certain identifier like your SKU or your ASIN, and then pull the necessary data inside your pivot table. If you haven't done it previously, I suggest just master it. It's not that hard. You can do it yourself. It will take like 10 minutes. So when you do through that, I will go through the exercise once, then you will know how you can pull your data from different sources and kind of build up this table that will help you highlight your underperforming products. So next, you can analyze each factor and try to understand what is actionable, right? And I have an example right here for the products that I have in the spreadsheet or this part of the spreadsheet. Let's take, first of all, a look at the gross profit, right? This is what we are, or our margin. Our gross profit in percentage is our margin, basically, the last column right here. So I can see that the first product looks very nice. So there's a 32% margin on this product. So this is very healthy. Then I have two products with 14 and 17% margin, which is not bad, depending on, what I'm selling. And there's also a product with a negative margin. This means that I'm losing money with every sale. I need to understand what should I do with it. And Next, I'm going to look at what can I actually influence or act on, right? First thing being the sales price, right? I can always try to adjust the price if I will still be there somewhere close to the buy box or in the buy box, if it will not influence too hard my sales, right? So if I have space there, then I can adjust the price. Next, I can see what's up with my refund rate. So usually Amazon actually introduced a fee in 2024. I think it is refund administration fee or something like that is called. And they actually introduced refund rate threshold for every product category. And they said, okay, if your products will exceed that threshold, then we will charge you with this fee. So meaning that they've kind of set, a cap or a normal level that they consider of refund rates for different product categories. And like, it's a good indicator. Usually, if you're going above that threshold with your products with refund rate, then probably there's something you need to look at and see what's the problem there. And usually it boils down to whether you have a problem on your listings, whether you have a product quality problem. So obviously, if you can control the listing, then you can try to, adjust what's there just to make sure your customer expectations are met. If you are able to source better quality products, that's also a very good option if it's possible, just to try and reduce that refund rate. So, by the way, one more important thing that's sometimes kind of slept on is if things change in the listing and you're unaware about that because you are on hundreds of listings, then you might continue to sell on that listing, even though the information on it changed and customers are already expecting to receive something else, but you'll sell on it with your product that meets the previous description or the previous information that was listed on the listing. So that's when returns start coming in because the customer's expectations are not met. So the cure to that is being notified or receiving alerts each time something changes on that listing, because you can act. You can decide whether, you can still sell there, or maybe you need to make changes or request changes for it. So that's an important thing. Maybe we'll get to the alerts part as well, but this is a part of why the refunds might happen and how we can act. Then cost of goods, obviously you can negotiate, or maybe you can find better sources for procurement. Then this is a way to influence your percentage of cost of goods from the total price that the customer paid, right? From the total sales. Then Amazon fees. This is something you can try and avoid, because some of the Amazon fees can be avoided if they are in essence a penalty, right? For something you didn't do, or maybe for something that you underlooked. Maybe you're paying in long-term storage fees, right? If you can get those products out of the FBA, then you can avoid paying long-term storage fees. Or maybe those are low inventory fees, right? Maybe you don't have enough inventory that Amazon requires to have. I think they want 21 days of sales or something like that. So maybe you can send in more. Or maybe this is the refund administration fee, so the one I mentioned previously, and you can try to get your refund rate down so you can avoid that fee as well. So there are certain fees you can try to avoid paying because, depending on what your situation. If you know about that, if you can detect that they've been applied, and you can do it on an account level and then zoom into products and see which products specifically were hit with those fees, then it's also a good way to analyze, what should be done, how to act. I highlight the necessity of being able to zoom in from account level to product level and just to discover the reasons why your margin so and so. And then final point is your TACAs, so how much you're spending on your advertising, and what's your total advertising cost of sales, and maybe you have room for optimizing your advertising, right? So optimizing beats, optimizing keywords, and doing stuff needed to decrease the TACAs. So basically, just to do a small recap, 5 things you can do: adjust, reduce, negotiate, avoid, and optimize. And these things are all part of refining your situation with the product, because you can, if you have a good situation, then you want to retain that product and protect it, protect the sales for products that have a high margin, make sure that they have enough stock, then monitor obviously the competitor activity, and then see if there are any changes on the listing. So you don't want to influence or anything happening to, the sales velocity that you have for those products. And then if you want to try to adjust your margin in a way to have one of these 5 options: adjust, reduce, negotiate, avoid, and optimize. So basically, I already laid the options in front of you. And sometimes none of these things will work because their margin is just not good enough and you can do nothing about it. So that happens in just a matter of catalog hygiene, right? So that's also sometimes the case. All right. So pretty much this is the approach. These were the underperforming products and retain, refine, or remove approach. Next, let's talk about the excessive fees and hidden costs. So I already touched on the subject a little bit in the previous part, but the way you can tackle those excessive fees is by avoiding aged inventory, low inventory, inbound placement fees. I think, it introduced them back in 2024. There were a lot of discussions about it, how you can avoid that. Amazon, I think they rolled out some kind of instructions about the boxes, 5-box rule and stuff like that. So if you can, then it's also doable. Then return processing fee, the one I just mentioned earlier, introduced in 24 as well. So all of these fees, and there are also other fees, Amazon fees, that can be avoided as well. But these 4 were like from the top of my mind that can actually be avoided, right? So we'll talk about the return processing fee, by the way, in a little bit more details down the line, the presentation. So aside from that, also, when we are calculating margin and we want to achieve a certain level of accuracy, it's necessary to include things that are outside of Amazon, but are also a part of your business and you're kind of the things that you're paying for. Think of service, or maybe services you're paying for, talent, software subscriptions, knowledge that you're obtaining, and maybe guidance, mentorship, rent if you have a warehouse or an office space or something. And maybe if you're doing FBM, maybe the materials that you're working with for, handling order preparation, stuff like that. So all of these things also need to be included in the margin because this is something you pay for. And if not accounted for, these are invisible, costs. So they are silent profit killers as well. So make sure to find a way to include these in the calculations. Moving on, the returns. So returns are also one of my favorite topics and a major profit killer. A lot of the cases, sellers don't really take the time to understand the refund cost structure. So when the refund happens, there are certain things that Amazon reimburses you with as a seller, and then some things that Amazon doesn't reimburse you with. So they keep it to themselves. And this is the first step in order to tackle the refund situation. The first thing to do is to understand the refund cost structure. And I've compiled this little short, kind of, I don't know, what is it? not the chart, it's like a visual representation of what the customer pays for. So think of it like this. The green line on the left is how much the customer paid for the item itself and for the delivery, right? And that's your potential profit in there. That's the cost of goods, FBA fee, the referral fee, and also shipping chargeback. So that's everything that goes inside what the customer pays. Then on the right, you see the same situation, but what happens when a customer applies for a refund, right? So then we have these elements. We have shipping chargeback, refunded by Amazon, referral fee is refunded by Amazon, your cost of goods. This is conditional. So only it can be considered refunded if the item is returned back to the warehouse by the customer. And sometimes that can even go unnoticed that the customer got refunded, but they didn't return the product back to the warehouse. So that can happen. But even if they return the product, sometimes that product is unsellable, right? So if it's unsellable, then it is a part of your loss inside the return cost structure. So then the FBA fee is not refunded by Amazon, then your potential profit obviously is lost. So you didn't make any profit on the sale. And then you have a refund administration fee. So administration fee is something that was always there and it's charged by Amazon. So this goes on top of everything that we discussed over here. So aside from that, you have two more fees that potentially might influence your refund. So returns processing fee. So that is charged in the case if your return ratio for that product is higher than the threshold set by Amazon. And then you might also have to remove that product. In that case, you pay for the removal fee, right? If the product is unsellable. So this is also conditional. And you can already see that the potential loss that you can have in the worst case scenario is really a lot. And think of it that there are a lot of returns that might happen without you analyzing their refund cost structure, because you then don't have an approach that would allow you to uncover this on an account level. So make sure that you're analyzing, make it a part of your routine, at least maybe once in a couple of weeks, just to dig inside and see what's happening in there. So what are how your returns are influencing your profitability? That's probably the bottom line question I would like to ask myself. So how is that affecting my business, right? All right. So yeah, just a little bit about return specific fees. The refund administration fee, for those of you who don't know, I think it hasn't changed so much. 20% of the FBA fee, or $5. That's the refund administration fee. Then returns processing fees, that is the new one, and it starts at 1.78, and or for the 2 ounces or less. And the removal fee is conditional, but it starts at $1.04. I think these prices or fees, costs, I've pulled them a while ago, so now chances are they're already higher. My point here is not to give you exact numbers, but just to show you that these are pretty high costs linked to your returns. And then when they pile up, and if you have a large a large catalog, then that builds up to a pretty big sum. All right, so a little bit about the returns processing fee introduced back in June 24. What I like actually about this fee, this might sound a little bit strange, but I like that when Amazon rolled out the new fee, they also gave sellers a tool to analyze their refund rates in a very, I'd say, very good way. So it's sellercentral.amazon.com/FBA/returns. So if you're logged into your Seller Central, I suggest going to this link and checking out your refund rate situation. And they give you the option to analyze all of this on an account level and then on the product level as well. And you'll see, when looking at your return rates on the product level, you will see this dotted line that will represent the threshold set for this product category. And then you'll see the chart that will display how your product is performing. So are you above that dotted line? Are you below? And how things evolved over time. So yeah, use it just to see, how much you're overpaying, or maybe you're not overpaying, depending on what your threshold is and what your return rate is. All right, moving on. Next, how we can act on returns. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic pill, so you probably know these things better than I do, that, the returns can only be cured by investing in high quality products and ensuring your listings have accurate information about the product. So, customer expectations are met. And that also the packaging that you use ensures that you don't damage the product while delivering and so on. And also another important thing, that if you are able to do it, try to proactively resolve issues with your customers if they have questions and so on when they reach out to you, because this also tends to lower your refund rate. All right, so yeah, returns. the FBA errors next. Some of the things that are done on the Amazon side, they might end up basically owing you money, right? Amazon makes mistakes sometimes, and there are certain types of mistakes that Amazon does, and they can reimburse you after that. But you need to identify these errors. In most of the cases, they identify the errors themselves, but sometimes it happens that they don't, right? So you need to also have a recurring workflow, or maybe just make this process a part of your workflow to analyze whether Amazon reimbursed you for everything that they should have for. Just getting a little bit ahead of myself, with SellerBoard, you have a bunch of reports that can help you learn just that. And the first being lost and damaged inventory, right? So I have, again, it would be best to make a screenshot of this, because here are 8 steps that can help you generate the report in Seller Central that will help you understand what are the cases for lost and damaged inventory, right? So it's here. You can do it on your own, but also it's available in SellerBoard, just a click and you can pull over all of those cases. But aside from lost and damaged inventory, you can also have returns that didn't arrive to the warehouse, right? That the customers got refunded for, and you got also charged for certain things. I showed you the refund cost structure and what things you are charged for by Amazon when refunds happen. But the customer didn't return the product to the warehouse, right? So your cost of goods, again, is a loss in that case. So in those cases, Amazon doesn't necessarily reimburse you all with times. Sometimes they might miss it, right? So this is a good time to detect those cases and open up a case with Seller Central support and try to see what's up, if they can reimburse you for that as well. Then excessive FBA fees when they wrongly measure the product, and or maybe they place it in a different product category and you are overpaying in fees, in FBA fees. So in those cases, you can learn how much time you've been overpaying in FBA fees. And if you can provide a report to Amazon Seller Central saying, hey guys, this fee changed a while ago, I've been overpaying, let's go ahead and reconcile all of that, because I've been overpaying in FBA fees. So that's also a way to get reimbursed. And also the errors in inbound shipments. So you've sent an amount, they received another amount of units. So having a system that would highlight the cases when these numbers don't match and you have discrepancies will also enable you to detect these cases and basically open up tickets with Seller Central to get reimbursed. And I think from here, we also introduced another report. It's called Reimbursement Gap Report. So what that does, it detects how much Amazon reimbursed you for specific products. And then it looks at the cost of goods for those products and it understands whether there's a discrepancy, a gap, because Amazon used a wrong COGS and reimbursed you less than they should have. So yeah, MBA errors are also one of the profit killers as well. And the last one are silent events. So with silent events, as I mentioned previously, there are a whole different bunch of events that might happen, but listing change is one of the mains. New sellers on the listing, loss of buy box, category changes, changes in FBA fees, and so on. If you don't know when they happen and what changed, then potentially you might be in trouble. So it's also worth having a system that would notify you about these events. Yeah, so I think that pretty much this is it on the profit killers part. And yeah, it's worth probably highlighting that when we're talking about analyzing profit, the most important part is being able to answer the question. So how much how much profit are you generating per unit sold, right? If you're able to answer that question, pretty much you're good. All the other things will help you as well, but that is the main core question. But just think about answer that question fully. You need to take a lot of things into account. I'll be glad to show you, first of all, obviously answer your questions now. And if you're interested, show you how SellerBoard can help you answering that question. Maybe we can start with a question that you might have Maybe we have some SellerBoard users in the chat.
Yes, I do. Yes. Well, first of all, you were really twisting the knife there, making it seem like we don't want to do all of that manually. That's painful. You're going to show us how SellerBoard solves that problem for you, right?
Yes, definitely.
SellerBoard was what opened my eyes to all of the different fees. Like I didn't even know there was a refund administration fee for a long time. So, and to your point, maybe it was because it didn't start until I actually had access to the tool. So real quick, first question, is there an in-depth training that has already been recorded for SellerBoard that's on YouTube or anything?
Yes. So on our YouTube channel, that probably is the best source for training and learning about SellerBoard right now. We have a list of videos on different topics and features. So and that is the number one place to go if you want to learn how SellerBoard works.
All right. Next one is, how do you check exactly how old inventory is so that you don't get charged fees for inventory over 6 months old?
Seller Central. I'm not really sure how you can check that in Seller Central. What I can tell you that we don't have a tracker for that in SellerBoard. So we can only tell you that you've been hit with this fee, and you will probably also be able to find the products where this fee was applied. But how old is the inventory? How much time did you spend in the warehouse? This might be a good feature request, but because we don't have it yet.
Okay, good. Under refine, what is optimize ACOS or ACOS?
Okay, so under refine, that's optimizing your advertising cost of sale. So if you're able to bring your ACOS down, right? So optimize how much you are spending on advertising, then this will leave more space for your margin, for basically the profit that you're making.
Okay. The question that was asked before the webinar began was around how do we bulk upload our cost of goods?
Yeah, so I can actually share my screen and jump into SellerBoard account and
That would be great.
show you exactly how it works.
Perfect.
Okay, so when you're uploading your cost of goods in SellerBoard, it can be done in several ways. So let me show you all of them. First of all, you have a products page right here that has all of your catalog inside. And if you want to bulk upload cost of goods, the first and one of the, I would say, like the first and most important way to bulk upload cost of goods is the import function right here. So how it works, you have three different approaches to it. You can upload your cost of goods by product, meaning that you're able to provide different entries for your cost of goods for any product from your catalog, or maybe multiple entries for the same product in your catalog using the import function by product. So you're basically providing cost of goods entries for specific products, right? And that might be for different dates, because you can account for your cost of goods by period, meaning that in different periods of time, you can have different values for cost of goods because cost of goods change over time. Or you can use the weighted average, right? So it's very similar to by period, with the difference that while transitioning from a period to another, the remainder of stock from the previous batch is taken into account. So for that, you need to have not only the value for your old cost of goods from the previous period and the new cost of goods for the new period, but also the values from the old batch and the new batch of products in terms of quantity. And then a weighted average is done, is calculated. And then there's also the first in, first out approach, FIFO, in short, which is the most accurate because you literally account for every unit from your batch. So SellerBoard counts how many units have been sold, and then it looks from which batch those units came because, you're providing, okay, first I have 100 units of this product at this cost of goods, and then I also sent in 200 units with another cost of goods, and SellerBoard will sell out the first batch first and then switch to the next one. And then starting day is like the 1st of January, let's say, right? And then the quantity is 100 units. Then you would have product A, the same product in your next line in the spreadsheet. And you would say again, but now it's $1.5 and the starting date for this batch is the 1st of February. And there's 300 units in that batch. So you're basically providing two different entries, two different batches in the same file for the same product. And you can have multiple different products in there. Basically, it's just a way, a medium to import data into SellerBoard. So this is the by product approach. Then there's the by batch approach. This is similar to by product, with the only difference is that all of the entries inside the spreadsheet that you will upload are linked to one specific date, because this is one single batch. And you can only have one single line for every ASIN. You cannot upload to different values inside a single batch for the same product because it's only same date. And you cannot have two entries on the same date with different values for cost of goods.
You can't have two entries on the same date with different cost of goods
For the same product, right?
for the same product. Okay. Because a follow-up question I had was, when we're entering cost of goods, what do you do when you purchase from various different places that all have different costs? So you need to put those in on different days?
Yes, because the days you might receive them on the same day. It doesn't really make too much difference. When you're using the FIFO method, right? The dates are only used so that the system understands the order in which to sell the batches. So if you say, okay, this is like 100 units that will be sold starting as of the 1st of January, right? And then you have 200 units that will be sold on the 2nd of January, and then on the 3rd of January, and so on. Even though the products might have come in the same day from different suppliers, right? In the same product.
Yeah.
But why do you need different dates that will be consecutive? Because the system needs to understand the order of these batches. And the dates themselves don't really matter too much, because the switch between cost of goods will not happen on a certain date. It will happen when a certain batch will run out, right? So the dates are there for FIFO specifically, only to show the system the order in which to place the batches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. And I see right here, we can include only active products that have 0 in the COGS space right now. So if I've already got it in my system, I don't want to override it necessarily.
Yes, that's correct. And also, this is about downloading the template. So when you want to upload the spreadsheet, you can take two different approaches. Either you're using your own spreadsheet that you compiled, I don't know, from different sources, or you have your own spreadsheet, right? The only important thing that I want to highlight, when you're importing data into SellerBoard, then make sure that the data type inside your spreadsheet corresponds to whatever you're trying to upload. So meaning that your values for cost of goods, that column specifically, needs to be a number type, because it shouldn't be text, right? And then your dates should be dates. It doesn't really matter which kind of dates, European dates, US dates, right? But they need to be dates, because in any Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel or whatever, you can set the data type, right? So the system needs to understand which data type is that. Your values for cost of goods need to be numbers, dates need to be dates, your quantities for your batches need to be numbers as well. None of it except the names and ASINs should be text. So make sure you have that, because otherwise you will have problems or trouble importing the data. And other than that, you can use your own spreadsheets, or you can download the template. So if you will click on template, then you will download a file, an Excel file that will contain all of your catalog, or if you check this box right here, that will contain only products that have 0 COGS right now. And you'll be able to just provide the cost of goods inside that template, right? And the template will contain all of those columns. And also, I think it will have an example of entries, so you can see what can be edited in there. You will also be able to provide different cost of goods for different marketplaces if you're selling in multiple. And then you will just say, okay, this is Amazon.com, this is Amazon.ca. And if you will leave that column blank, for marketplace, then we will update the cost of goods for your main marketplace, which might be for Amazon.com, for instance. Also, the last option right here, and I didn't finish with the import. So you can provide your own spreadsheet. In that case, when you will import that file and click import, SellerBoard will suggest mapping out the data, meaning you will define columns. So it will say, okay, tell me in which column you have the cost of goods. So there will be drop-down lists and you will select from drop-downs. Or you can also provide a Google spreadsheet link in here. When you do so, make sure to provide the necessary permissions. So if you're using Google Documents, then while sharing the link, give access rights to whoever has the link. So then the system will pull the data. So yeah, last thing in here, you can also upload your cost of goods by order. If you have a certain order in number of units in there, so you can import that information by order. That's a very, I would say, edge case, but sometimes it happens and sometimes sellers do that. This is one way to do it. So how you can upload your cost of goods in bulk, you can do it by using that spreadsheet right here. How can you also do it? I'd say if you have let's say you have an invoice, right, for a certain number of products, you can create a multi-product batch by clicking on this product right, or on this button right here. You can add products. So from your catalog, you can say, okay, I want this product and I want this product and also have this product in an invoice. And these are the units. So I have 100 units of these products, 200 of these, and 200 of this. And these are the cost of goods. So basically, I'm providing a multi-product batch I'm creating. And I'm also specifying my date right here. So when exactly that batch came in. This is also like a semi-bulk upload, I would say. And another beautiful thing about it, I think that my colleagues recently introduced, and I really love it, you can pull now all of this data from an existing FBA ship. So if you send an FBA shipment, you can say, okay, show me my current FBA. Chances are yes, in this demo account, it will not have any FBA shipments available, but try it in your account. And then SellerBoard will pull all of the products from that FBA shipment with the quantities. You will only need to provide the cost of goods for each product. And then boom, you have that batch imported.
Got it. Great. I didn't know about that little tip you just shared there by looking at your shipments. That's good. You know, one other feature that I find is really helpful for us is the ability to amortize our monthly and annual expenses by the day. Can you just give us a quick overview how to do that?
Sure, of course. So if you're talking about indirect expense, overhead expenses, those are managed over here on the indirect expenses page. And as you correctly stated, they can be amortized. So if, for instance, I'm paying for, let's say, SellerBoard, right? So this is one of the things I'm paying for. This is my subscription. And I'm paying a total of $19 per month. I rather can amortize them to see 19 divided into small daily portions so I can know how much exactly is SellerBoard taking away from my profitability each day. So then when I do that, and I can also create a category because, costs are of different types and you can then later on analyze how they evolved over time. And you can also apply costs for different products. So when I will save that cost, then diving into my profit analysis, I can go to my dashboard and I can analyze my performance, for instance, maybe for today. Okay. I'm just going to point out where exactly it should show up over here under indirect expenses. I can expand that and see all of the expenses that are affecting my today's profitability. So like amortizing by the day. But this is not the only thing you can amortize. Speaking of amortizing, we can also go to settings. You can go to general and you can go to settings on your account level over here, go to calculation logic, and you can also amortize your FBA storage fees.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. I didn't realize that was there.
Yeah, because they also tend to be like a pretty nice sum that comes in every, I think, bi-weekly, if I'm not mistaken, with the settlement report. So instead of having that, like affecting your profitability for that day, just amortize them and you'll have a little bit less of a headache.
Now, any other Amazon fees you can do that with, or just the storage fee?
Storage fee from amortizing. And I think we're also looking into amortizing the inbound shipment, but I'm not sure about that. But so
the reason I like the amortization is that usually when I wake up in the morning, I'm in the positive, but I always start the day about $16 in the hole because I take all of my overhead or indirect expenses and I amortize them by the day. So I know how much money I need to make up in order to be profitable for the day. And if I'm profitable for the day, I know generally enough days in a row, I'm going to be profitable for the month.
yes, that makes sense. This is a very good approach, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, good.
The insight.
I was just going to see last chance for questions here. We just have a few minutes left. And before I give it back to you, Alex, for any closing thoughts, there is a 3-month trial link that we will be sending out post webinar here. And just a quick reminder, if you sign up for annual, you can also save 20% on the cost. So get your 3 months free and then go 20% annual and you get a year for a really the lowest cost I've seen. So, okay. Any final thoughts from you, Alex?
All right, since we don't have too much time, I really didn't invest too much into advertising the tool itself, but I will leave it all to you. So there's a demo account on SellerBoard.com. Before even registering with SellerBoard, you can go to the demo account. So let's go to SellerBoard.com, and this is demo account right here. So click on it, and you will see the same exact account I just showed you. Yeah. And in the demo account, you'll be able to play around. So you will see the profit analytics part of it. Make sure to check out 5 different views over here. The tiles view is the best one to analyze your daily performance, like Brian mentions, like with the workflow of understanding what's happening today versus, what will happen over time. And then there are also things that will help you perform a retrospective analysis going into analyzing the stuff. So picking a few metrics maybe that are of your interest and learning how they evolved over time, or maybe choosing the P&L view, which is like a giant spreadsheet that will give you a breakdown of everything that affects your profitability. So like sales, refunds, advertising costs, Amazon fees, all of that. And this is on an account level. And then again, as I told you in the presentation previously, you can always zoom in into product level, right? So you can see each product, how it performed over time, and getting a granular, detailed description of the same calculation logic that you had on an account level. So it's basically zooming in. Do that.
So and Alex, this answers a lot of the questions automatically that you were really twisting the knife on in the first part of this webinar about, imagine if you had to do this all with a spreadsheet and Xlips and pivot tables. One more thing I was going to ask you is that the map function. I covered this in an article that we put out in the Olson report, but the map function, if you ever wanted to know where your inventory is, you can kind of take a look right here. And this account is heavy in FBM, the demo account is, and so I'm not sure what they're going to show us from. There you go. You can see where your stock and your orders are coming from for your different products, which is really slick. I love that.
And under the map itself, the heat map, you will see also a grouping by region. So we see the states if you're selling in the states, and you can see how they performed. And also if you open them up, you will see performance of individual products in each state. So on top of that, if you're doing your own analysis, there's also a download icon over here. By the way, whenever you see this icon in the software, that means that you can download all of that spreadsheet and work with it, share it, whatever. Yeah. So, and yeah, there's also other things to talk about, but I would probably suggest just checking the demo account. And if you're interested registering, make sure to use that link that will give you the 3 months of free trial. Yeah. And while in the trial period, there's also always an option to organize a demo call. I do demo calls, so you can reach out to support. You can say, hey guys, please give me a link to book some time with Alex. I will be glad to do a 20-minute coverage of everything inside SellerBoard and help.
Great. Awesome. Alex, thanks again. And for those of you who may not have known, Alex, it's like after 11 o'clock at night, his time right into that. Thank you for staying up late, drinking some coffee. Appreciate you taking the time to give us all this great info, and I hope you have a great night. And thank you
Sure,
everyone
sure.
who attended as well. And, we're always here for you. Reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone, for your interest. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.